She stood outside the little café copyright for a moment, her heart pounding so loudly she was afraid people passing by could hear it. The rain had just stopped, leaving the street glistening, and she caught a faint reflection of herself in the glass window. She smoothed down the faded dress she had ironed 3 times the night before, the only one she owned that felt even slightly elegant. Her hair was pulled back neatly, though a strand or two had escaped, and she tucked them nervously behind her ear. With a deep breath, she stepped inside. The warm buzz of conversation and the aroma of coffee surrounded her instantly, but instead of comfort, it only made her feel smaller. Her eyes scanned the tables, searching for the man her friends had promised would be waiting. For a brief second, her heart lifted a maybe, just maybe, tonight wouldn't be so bad. Then she saw them. At the corner table, her so-called friends leaned in close to each other, stifling laughter behind their hands, their eyes fixed on her. One of them waved toward an empty chair, pretending it was meant for her, while the others exchanged mocking glances. That was the moment she realized it wasn't a real blind date at all. It was a a cruel joke at her expense. Still, she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Holding her chin high, she walked to the table reserved for her supposed date and sat down, folding her hands tightly to stop them from trembling. She ordered the cheapest coffee on the menu, knowing it was all she could afford, and told herself to act like she belonged there. But inside, her chest ached, and her eyes stung. She could hear faint chuckles coming from the corner, sharp enough to pierce through the café copyright's cheerful background noise. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into thin air. But instead, she sat tall, forcing a smile, her pride the only armor she had left. He sat at a small table near the window, half listening to his little boy chatter about toy cars while his coffee cooled. From the corner of his eye he kept watching the girlie, how she sat a little too straight, how her fingers curled around the thin paper cup as if it were an anchor. His son tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, why are they laughing?" The question landed like a stone. He was used to polite gatherings and polished faces that measured worth in elevator pitches and stock prices. But tonight, watching those friends snicker and trade glances, something in him tightened. He remembered nights when money meant nothing if you had no one to share it with, and nights when small cruelties felt enormous. The woman's quiet dignity, her attempt to hold herself steady while hiding the tremor in her hands, cut through his fatigue in a way he hadn't expected. Across the room, the friends grew louder, their laughter sharpened by the certainty that this was entertainment. "Look at her," one murmured, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "She thinks she belongs." The insults were soft and practiced, the kind that came from people who had never had to choose courage over humiliation. The man felt something in his chest, annoyance at their cruelty, and a sudden, fierce protectiveness toward the small, brave figure sitting alone. He glanced down at his son, who watched the scene with wide eyes, and he knew what he had to do. Not as a show, not to prove his status, but because a child was watching how men treated other people. He pushed his chair back slowly, smoothing his jacket not for appearance but to steady himself, and rose. The chatter around him swelled with expectation as some thought he would do the obvious, make a joke, add to the humiliation. Instead, he crossed the room with a calm that silenced his own heartbeat. When he stopped at her table, he lowered himself to the level of her hands on the cup, meeting her gaze with steady, unflinching eyes. He didn't smile a grand, theatrical smile. He offered something rarer, a look that said he saw her whole, not the caricature his friends had painted. The room held its breath, the laughter faltered, and even the boy beside him leaned forward, waiting to see what dignity looked like when someone chose it over cruelty. For a long second, the café copyright seemed to freeze. Her breath caught as she stared up at him, uncertain whether this was another cruel twist, another layer to the joke. But then she saw his eyes are clear, steady, filled with something no one had ever offered her before, respect. He reached for her trembling hand, his voice calm but strong enough to cut through the whispers around them. "If no one here has the sense to see your worth," he said, pausing as his fingers gently unclosed hers, Then let me. I don't want to sit and watch you be mocked. I want the honor of sitting with you, of knowing you." His son, barely able to contain himself, clapped his little hands and grinned, blurting out, "She's pretty, Daddy. Ask her to be our friend." The innocent words broke through the tension like sunlight piercing a storm. A stunned silence spread across the café. Copyright. The group of friends who had orchestrated the cruel setup sat frozen, their smirks slipping away as the weight of the moment turned against them. What had begun as their joke had turned into a scene none of them could control. The man did not stop there. He bent on one knee, right there in the middle of the café. Copyright. His son bouncing happily beside him. Gasps echoed from nearby tables. Phones were discreetly lifted to capture what was unfolding. "I don't care about your past, or what little you walked in here with tonight," he continued, his words steady, unshaken by the eyes staring at him. "What I see is a woman with more dignity than anyone else in this room, and I'd be a fool if I didn't ask a broken bar." His voice softened, yet carried all the power of truth. "A broken bar, will you give me the honor of a first date with me?" Her tears spilled then, but not from humiliation. These were tears of disbelief, of a heart that had long been ignored suddenly being chosen. Around them, whispers turned into stunned murmurs. The cruel laughter was gone. The girl, who had walked into the café copyright bracing herself for ridicule, now sat at the center of something she could never have imagined. With shaking lips, she whispered yes. And in that single word, the joke that was meant to break her became the moment that changed her life forever.